Coming up on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, this Dante Dowdell decision day. We're going to talk about what that means and how it looks and all the stuff going around that before he makes a decision later on in the afternoon today. It may happen by the time you watch this. And, of course, we'll go over games 10 through 12 of the Ole Miss schedule and tell you what to expect there. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I am your host, Stephen Willis, and thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So do us a favor and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also hit the bell for notifications when new videos are posted, which happens quite frequently. And, of course, you can upvote the video itself. If we hit 1,000 subscribers before football season, which I think we're going to do it. It looks like we're going to do it. We're going to do what we're calling post-game live. And we have people that's going to help out from time to time on that. We have Ole Miss football legends. We have high school coaches and stuff like that. Some days it'll just be me. But it's going to be completely interactive. And if you look over here on there, it will be a chat menu that you can participate and ask questions in and talk about things that are driving you crazy. And everybody else can see your thoughts. And it should be a lot of fun to do that. But that'll be post-game live right here on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast if we hit 1,000 views before the Troy game. So we have time to do it, and we're almost there. I think we're about 83% to our goal or something like that. So if you subscribe, or if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. If you have, tell a friend to subscribe. Tell them about the show and let them know what we're doing. We're not a news organization. We're not trying to report stuff. We're not trying to be the smartest person in the room. We're about providing perspectives and commentary about Ole Miss sports. The things that are important to you at any given moment, we're going to try and go over that. So we're going to do a lot of recruiting. We're going to do mostly football because Ole Miss's fan base is about 80 to 85% football only. About 10% baseball and about 5% everything else. So because of that, there will at least be one football segment in every single show we do. Even if nothing's going on, we're going to find a way to do football. We're going to find a way to discuss stuff that you care about because that is what you care about. And you can see by our thumbnails whenever you look on the YouTube page. Whenever there's a football thumbnail, the views go way up as opposed to a basketball or a baseball. It's just what it is. And you can see the same thing on Post-Game Pod that we did. The big viewed post-game pods that we did from teams are from other teams watching that video. But most of them about 100, 150 views. The spring game that didn't absolutely matter, it was red-blue, it was the Grove Bowl for Ole Miss, got 1,700 views. That's the reason we do things the way we do them. So, today is decision day for Dante Dowdell. This is a guy that had 2,500 rushing yards as a junior, top running back prospect. Picayune runs like a combination of the wing T and the I formation. So it's kind of like modern wing T football from back in the day for people my age that remember what that looks like. Mix that in with the power I and the I formation and that of the late 90s. And that's kind of what Picayune does. And they do it very well. So you have a guy that's running the ball like that. They treat him almost like Derrick Henry, but he's not Derrick Henry. He's not that big. He's about 210 pounds. He's about 6 foot tall. He reminds me of a plus Snoop Connor, who just got drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars. So if you want to see what he can do at this level, it's probably going to be what Snoop does. He has excellent vision. He can run away from people, but he's not a speed guy. He has quickness laterally. And he's a very physical back. Those are his strengths at the running back position. And I'm personally looking forward to if and when he decides to go to Ole Miss, what that running back room will look like. Now, everybody is hyper focused on the quarterback position at Ole Miss, and that makes complete sense. I get that. I'm not making fun of that even slightly a little, but you will see this year with the amount of running that this team is going to do with Zach Evans at running back, Ulysses Bentley, even Kentrell Bullock and Quinshon Judkins. You're going to add a Dante Dowdell. They're going to be able to recruit running backs. Now, if you take Lane Kiffin and admit that his major influence is USC under Pete Carroll, Dante Dowdell is kind of a Lindell White type back. You look at other speedsters that's going to Quinshon Judkins is a little bit shiftier. So I can see the Thunder and Lightning developing there, but they also have like high-level players ahead of them. But that's what it's looking like down the pipe. And this team's going to be 60% run. They're not going to throw the ball all over the field. They're going to protect the quarterback. As he gets more comfortable, they're going to throw the ball more, but they're never going to throw the ball more than they run it. This is not going to be an air raid type situation. Everybody confuses Lane Kiffin and the style of offense he runs, and that's absolutely fine. That's, whatever. Whenever you do that, it makes it harder to scout for us. So these running backs are going to become easier and easier to recruit as this develops. They're going to start stacking them. If Zach Evans has a big year, next year it's going to be even easier to recruit a running back. The NIL number is going to go down significantly. And I'm not even talking about the market. I'm just talking about what Ole Miss would need to pay to be competitive then versus now. Because as the running back improves and they prove that they can be a marketplace for that skill, the NIL number is going to go down a little bit to get that kid on your campus. So that'll save you a little bit of money. And as I've told you several times, Ole Miss is not the most wealthy school. They cannot compete in the NIL game. They're not a traditional recruiter. They can't do what the Alabamas, Georgias, Clemsons, Oklahomas, those guys do. They can't do that either. So they hit the transfer portal. And they recruit small numbers. So you might see 10 to 11 high school players signed. They're going to be handpicked, and they're absolutely going to be a take by Lane Kiffin. You can compete with them in the NIL threshold on 11 players. All of a sudden, that large group of money, you can do that on 11 players. You can dance with these people on 11 players. And the NIL market for transfer portal players is a little bit less. Basically, because it's a second time and there's not as much of an unknown. You know exactly what you have, exactly what they can do. And there's also a stigma whenever a person leaves a school. Exactly what you're going to be getting at your new school. That's going to change eventually, but that stigma still exists. So it's going to be a little bit less. So it allows a program like Ole Miss to compete, a smaller thing for that pie in the high school recruit market, and then not as much money in the transfer portal market. And after that, you can put 25 together, and you can actually have a pretty good, pretty talented team. Now, it's going to be up to Lane Kiffin to coach them up year to year, because it is quite obvious that he views the Ole Miss team as a team. It's going to be the 2022 team, and then it's going to be the 2023 team, and then it's going to be the 2024 team. It's not going to be the program. It is going to be year to year, because with the transfer portal, that is what they have to do. That is the sacrifice that you make by not being a traditional recruiter or an NIL monster. Is the ability to not build a program. It's more about building a team each year. These teams are going to be individualized. The coaching staffs are going to be individualized. The turnover is going to seem like a lot, and it's going to drive people crazy, especially people that like to collect players and collect coaches. And there's a segment of the fan base that's what they're in for. They want to be friends with the linebacker coach. They want to know the punt returner. They want to do that. And that relationship is going to completely change. Now, whether they want to adjust the way they look at football and what they want to get out of it, they might go away. But this, as a situation, we have a chance to build a larger fan base because of the talent that we're acquiring and the stratosphere that they're trying to play in. But remember, it's going to be the 2022 team, then the 2023 team, and then the 2024 team. All the schools are going to do that, but the carryover from one to the next is going to be different. It's going to look a little different. That's the reason Lane Kiffin sets up his staff the way he sets it up. Everything is about turnover because that's what we have to do to be massively competitive. Period. We're not going to be able to compete with the USC, Tennessee, or Texas A&M in the NIL market. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough money. We're not going to compete with the traditional recruiters because after Johnny Vaught just went away and they struggled for 40 years and then Ole Miss went into the abyss, fighting stupid culture wars. The football program suffered while programs like Alabama and LSU and all that thrived over that time period. We just kind of went away, and we ended up on the same level, and this is not a shot at Mississippi State, as Mississippi State. All because of our pride and the want to collect coaches and want to collect players, and all that is more important than actually winning games. The Grove is more important than what's going on at the stadium. And honestly, we put that in the tradition when we played so many big games in Jackson. The game in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium didn't really matter as much because the big games were being played in Jackson and there was no Grove. So the games in Oxford turned into a Grove game. The games in Jackson turned into the big games. So whenever everything moved back on campus, the games in the stadium didn't matter as much because if there's a game in Oxford, it's more important to be in the Grove. Again, not making fun of anybody tailgating in the Grove. I'm just stating facts of what's going on and unintended consequences. And the mistakes that were made by leadership and boosters in the 70s and 80s haunted us until essentially now. We're just now coming out of it. And part of that, I think, honestly, is boosters and fans are not as influential as they used to be. Each year, they get less and less influential. And the NIL market means they're going to start giving money outside of the university, and they're going to become not beneficiaries at all. You're not going to see gates named after people. You're not going to see the ego donations to a university. You're going to see them give to the NIL. You're going to try and compete for a team, and that is absolutely fine. But Dante Dowdell is going to commit today. He's a big player. If Ole Miss can get him, that will be absolutely huge. As Ole Miss becomes more of a running team, you'll see these running backs start to stack on each other. But he's a good back, 2,500 yards for the Picayune Maroon Tide or Maroon Wave. It's either Maroon Tide or Maroon Wave. I don't know which one, but great player. And if he chooses Ole Miss, that'll be all the more reasons to celebrate what's going on. So I'm really impressed by that and everything that is coming up. All right. So imagine dipping your finger into that plastic tub of birthday cake frosting and then opening your eyes and realizing that it was only 150 calories and 16 grams of protein. That's what it's like to eat a birthday cake puff from Built. I just received my birthday cake puffs, and I've never had anything like this before. They're available right now, and we can't promise they'll be there tomorrow, so go get them at Built.com. So you can make every day your birthday with Built's birthday cake puffs. Built has taken the delicious experience of biting into that fresh slice of birthday cake and enrobed it in 100% white chocolate and added sprinkles. And they are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Go to Built.com and get the birthday cake puffs now. So here's the offer. Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15. That is all one word, LOCKED15, and get 15% off your order. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Make sure to go check out the Locked On NBA Big Board. Host Raphael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and author of the NBA Big Board newsletter is joined by Richard Strayman, Sam Ferris, and Leif Thulin, giving fans an in-depth look at NBA draft, mock draft, player rankings, and of course, big boards. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Yes, it should be pretty good. All right, so we need to move on to the schedule part of our show. This is a Friday thing. I'm about to go to Disney tomorrow. I'll be at Animal Kingdom. I will report back during the all-season shows about anything that we see, Expedition Everest and all that. June 4th, we'll be riding the Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind for the first time. We'll report about that as well. So we're about to reach Disney season on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, And I will do extra videos and our off-topic videos from time to time about what's going on at the parks. That's just a way that's not really, it's just an unbiased look of what's going on at the parks and what can be happening. All I want to do is have fun, and I'll probably report it from that mindset. So, if you look at the schedule coming up, this is the bear. This is the big boy. This is what we've been waiting for. November 12th, Saturday against Alabama. That's a game that potentially could be the primetime CBS game. I mentioned before that Ole Miss has a chance to be between 6-3 and 9-0 going into this part of the draft. Now, could they be below that? Yes, absolutely. But there's two games going before the Mississippi State game. I do not think Ole Miss is going to lose the Mississippi State game. Ole Miss, I think, has better players, better team than Mississippi State at this point. That's not a shot at State before you hear that. But this is a game that I'm not really worried about. So if you look at that right off the bat, it's 7-3 or 10-0 with two other games, right? The Alabama game, I think, has a chance to be a war. And absolute war. You got Will Anderson and you got Dallas Turner playing linebackers. They're going to rush in. They're going to be a handful. Will Anderson got robbed from going to New York last year. I expect Ole Miss to throw a lot of screen passes. I expect Ole Miss to run a lot of draws. Anything to keep those edge rushers and defensive line, buy yourself a second or two. Mess with their get off. Make them think a little bit. And Lane Kiffin in 2020 did just that. I expect something like that to pop up in this game. Also, a weakness that Alabama has is defending the tight end. The tight end is always a weakness against Alabama. I don't know what it is. They just have trouble against a competent tight end. So Michael Trigg, in that same role of Kenny Yeboah in 2020, will be out there doing stuff and forcing Alabama to think about that. Now, my point talking about all of this is that Henry To'oTo'o is I don't want to say liability in pass coverage because he's a really good player. All the players at Alabama are really good players. So just remember that when I talk about a player at Alabama, it's kind of on a relativity scale. So don't think that I'm bagging on an Alabama player because Henry To'oTo'o is a hell of a linebacker and he's a heck of a run stopper. But his weakness is he wants to stop the run. And against an RPO-heavy offense, he wants to charge up to the line of scrimmage so you can hit him behind him on an RPO. Now, the way Alabama combated that last year was to push the safeties up and play really physical, and we didn't really have the time or anything to attack down the field. I think they're going to use the inside receivers and start to play games with safeties, and the outside receivers are going to see a couple of deep shots as the game goes on. The Alabama game in Tuscaloosa, everybody talks about the going for it and everything in the first half, how it got on hand. But how many times during that game was a pass completed on a 3rd and 8 and it ended up being a 4th and 1? Alabama was so physical in that game. That's the thing people don't realize. I think they were so physical in that game. And I expect Alabama's going to crank that up again. And they're going to be just as physical when they come to Oxford. So Ole Miss needs to be prepared. I mean, really prepared for what is going to come in. Because this has a chance to be a big thing. College game day, the whole 9 yards in Oxford for November 12th. And like I said, it could be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that game. But it's not one that Ole Miss will probably be favored in. Alabama's probably going to be the favorite team. They're going to be favored by probably 5 to 9 points in that game. But it's a game that Ole Miss can win. And it's a game that I think Ole Miss is going to try to win in a unique way. Now, we just got through talking about Alabama, and the next one we're talking about is the most scary game on the schedule to me. And the Mississippi State, or the Arkansas Razorbacks in Fayetteville. Fayetteville has been a house of horrors for Ole Miss ever since I can remember. When David Cutcliffe was the coach, Arkansas actually scored a touchdown on one of our kickoff returns. So weird things have happened in Fayetteville. And they run a similar type offense to what we run. So everything's kind of set in the way to do it. We run a similar style defense that they run. And that creates an interesting dichotomy. Now, you're going to see Arkansas try to run the ball. They're going to try and play murder ball against Ole Miss. They're going to try and run KJ Jefferson. You're going to see all that with Sam Pittman in Arkansas, that by this point, they could be 6-3, 7-2, even. Because they could have a good team. Now, they do not have Treylon Burks, and that does hurt them. But they do have those guys at running backs and really good players. So it's a game that honestly concerns me. It really does. And because it concerns me, I almost want to put this as an L. I just do. When I look at this game and where it sits in the schedule, all I can see is loss. And I think this might be a game that Ole Miss might be favored in. Ole Miss is favored by 2 or 3 points. But it's just one of those that's like almost like a sucker bet. And I think Arkansas could be a pretty good team this year. I think Arkansas could be pretty salty. But we'll see what happens. But with that defense, Jackson Dart can't have one of his games like Matt Corral had 2 years ago against Arkansas and LSU, because they will work on you in the secondary. And they make those windows increasingly smaller. And I mean, it's going to be a pretty big thing. So, those are the first 2 games of our set. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the Egg Bowl, because the Egg Bowl is, like I said, the game that matters. And the reason it's the game that matters is because our boosters and leadership back in the late 60s, early 70s and all that, creating a path to where Ole Miss couldn't get out of. And that's fine. I mean, we are where we are. It doesn't do any good to talk about the missteps and mistakes of the past, but they absolutely happened. This team went from an absolute power in the early 60s, late 50s, to being an afterthought by 1975. It's really like Nebraska. It's really like Tennessee. It's the same thing that happens always. And also, Alabama fans, if you're all watching this, when Nick Saban leaves, y'all are going to go down too. Those same boosters are going to try and scratch and claw to get the influence that Nick Saban took away back, and it's going to be a detriment to your program. That happens everywhere. It happens all over the country. Anyway, our partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds and news and sports developments, including this year, basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, even the next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Do not forget to rate and review us on iTunes. Give us a 5-star review. You can say whatever you want to say. You can talk about how I don't know what I'm talking about, and I probably just shut my mouth, and everybody would be better off without me here. But do it with a 5-star review if you don't mind. That'll help others find the podcast as well, and we can expand and grow and make this a completely fun place. Because our goal, our actual goal of the site, our business plan, our essential thesis, or whatever you call it, is to make following Ole Miss football fun again. It isn't about breaking news. We don't want to live in that bubble. We've separated ourselves entirely from it. And we just want to cover what people are talking about and use that as a sounding board. We're getting perspectives from different fans. We didn't want to go grab experts to talk about experts, to talk about what's going on with Ole Miss sports. We wanted to go talk to fans. That's the reason Kara, that's the reason Tom, that's the reason Derek have become what they've become. It's just because they stepped up and did it. And in the fall, we're going to add a couple of interns. We're going to add Twitter Spaces to our repertoire. We are going to add a little bit of an Oxford flavor to our repertoire, and with all those guys, they're going to participate on the show, and we're going to continue to talk and continue to grow. And with Post-Game Live, you'll see our shows start to become more interactive and such. That should be a lot of fun. Anyway, In the first segment, we talked about today being decision day for Dante Dowdell. In the second segment, we talked a little bit about the Alabama and Arkansas games. Now we're going to close out with the Egg Bowl. This is an important game for Mike Leach. It is. They're going to come into this game completely guns blazing. And because of that, Chris Partridge has been the defensive coordinator with DJ Durkin. He's seen how to handle Mississippi State. You're going to see a lot of drop 8. You're going to see everything to force Mississippi State to methodically drive down the field. There's not many college teams that can do that. If you force that, it's going to be fairly low scoring. Now, if you decide to go out there and play man coverage, they're going to eat you alive. So everybody goes out, drops 8, rushes 3, maybe 4 every now and then. You got to keep that offensive line guessing a little bit, and because of that, you can be fairly effective defensively. Now, if your offense scores some points against them, they're going to have a lot of trouble. And I think they've scored over 30 the last 2 years, and Mississippi State's offense is not going to be able to match that right now. Now, this is year 3 in a Mike Leach offense, and if you look at them traditionally at Texas Tech, at Washington State, year 3 they make a jump. He's done that everywhere he's been. Now, I do not think they're going to make a jump like they did at Washington State and get to the Pac-12 championship game. I don't think that at all. But it could be something they have a better season than we're expecting. Now, we're not expecting them to be very good. We're expecting 5-7, 6-6, in that ballpark. And when you draw on your Eastern Division opponents, Georgia and Kentucky, that's kind of a hard deal too. Like Ole Miss gets Vandy in Kentucky. Can live with that. You got Vandy, you can do whatever you need to do. And then you've got the SEC West behemoth that is just going to happen. So this is a game that is massively important for Mike Leach. If he loses this game, no matter how he does this season, I don't care if Mississippi State goes 10-2. If he loses to Ole Miss for the 3rd time, he will be on the hot seat, period. Now, and I don't think they are going to be good enough to win the next year either, because if you look at the talent level for years, for absolute years, like last year Ole Miss had 17 4 and 5 stars on their roster. That's about what Mississippi State had. It was a talent profile that was fairly even. Now Ole Miss is sitting at like 34. The talent profile is going to be harder and harder for Mississippi State to catch up. Plus, here's the thing that Mississippi State needs to consider as well, because they broke the Mike Leach glass. They did this. It is hard for the next coach to turn around what happens at Mississippi State or at Texas Tech or at Washington State, unless you're doing air raid stuff that is the same type thing that you got away from. In which case, if you believe Mike Leach is your guy, he needs to be your guy. But if they bring in somebody to run the ball and run something that's kind of traditionally Mississippi State, they're years away from being relevant. Like 4 or 5 years, just to build back up the players to run that system. So you're looking at a potential, what could be a 3 or 4 type year winning streak for Ole Miss, all the way up to like 8 or 9. This could be a disastrous period for Mississippi State football. And it's almost what they get for getting rid of Joe Moorhead. It kind of is. He was 2-0 against Ole Miss. He was doing quite well. Nick Fitzgerald ran for like 800 yards in 2018 on him or something like that. And it's just a hard thing for them to deal with. But this is a game that I expect Ole Miss to be favored by 10 to 14 points by the time it actually happens. It's one that I am chalking up as a W. I know everybody says that when Ole Miss plays Mississippi State, you can throw out the records. I just don't see that. I just don't. I have a different mindset, okay, when it comes to playing games. And because of that, I don't know if it's me being in the hall and being in that environment. I don't know if it's me being at rivals. I don't know if it's me going through Ole Miss or whatever happened. But I have a different mindset when it comes to these games. First of all, understand this about me. I do not care about the opponent whatsoever. Now, I didn't say I don't respect them, and I didn't say they weren't good, because I'll talk about them, do whatever. But when it comes to anything, if Ole Miss is playing Alabama, all I care about is how Ole Miss is going to do against Alabama. I do not care what Alabama does against Ole Miss. So whenever people talk about the games and you listen to their breakdown of it, and it's either the other team lost or Ole Miss lost, there's nothing really discussed about who won. That's a problem for me. So everything is going to be very Ole Miss centric. Whenever I give an analysis of something, it's either going to be about how Ole Miss won or Ole Miss lost. It's not going to be about the other team winning. And it doesn't matter really if it is in the big scheme of things, but it gives you a different perspective of how to look at the game. And honestly, the way an Ole Miss fan probably wants to look at the game. They don't care about Alabama winning a game. They care about Ole Miss losing it. They don't care about Alabama losing a game. They care about Ole Miss winning it. So that's one. Two, when you look at opponents, I do not play the rivalry game at all. I do not view Memphis and Southern Mississippi any differently than I do Louisiana Tech or Louisiana Monroe. Ole Miss has an athletic budget that's around $110 million. Southern Miss is about $20 million. They have one of the tiniest athletic budgets in FBS. Just because they would be really excited to play us does not change any of that. Memphis, just because they'd be really excited to play us, does not change any of that. Now, their budget is up closer to ours because they're an American team. But a Sun Belt team, not a single Sun Belt team should be viewed as like, we have nothing to gain. We have nothing to gain when you play ULM. You have nothing to gain when you play Louisiana Tech. You had nothing to gain when you played Liberty. The 1AA games, the FCS games, I don't even want to talk about those. There's nothing to gain there. So it's all an excuse to where if we lose the game, it just is going to hurt much because you have potentially talked noise to their fan base over the years, and you're afraid they're going to bring it back. That's all that really is. Because talent-wise, it's not going to be that close. Southern Miss is not an exceptional Sun Belt team. They're not Coastal Carolina. Now, you want to talk about teams that you don't have anything to gain playing? It's probably Coastal. It's not Southern Miss. So, it is what it is. Anyway, we are going to go to Disney tomorrow. Later today, we are going to record with Tom Vanderford in his normal segment. He couldn't do today's show for some prior commitments, but we told him we want to get him on anyway. And he's also going to record segments for our Mount Rushmores. That'll be our last thing. So I'm going to edit that this weekend. So you might see them next week, at the latest the week after that. Because as you know, they are renovating the palatial Central Florida studios like crazy. They should be about 95% done by Wednesday. And we still have to have our carpet cleaned. And that's only big because there's carpet in here. So there might be a day that we aren't able to do a show. And depending on what it is, we might do a Mount Rushmore that day or something like that. So you guys aren't doing without. But we're looking for an extra of Tom Vanderford. And we have a couple of Mount Rushmores that are going to be in the can this weekend. So it should be a lot of fun. I mean, it should be a lot of fun. But anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Monday, we're going to talk about probably Dante Dowdell. And we're starting to get ready for off-season. If Ole Miss can win 2 or 3 against LSU, all of a sudden that becomes a story a little bit. Anyway, get all of your SEC news in less than 30 minutes with SEC expert Chris Gordy. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. This has been a fantastic week. Thanks, everybody. Tell your friends about it so they can subscribe to the YouTube channel as well, and we will keep bringing you high-quality information. Anyway, peace.